What's up, and welcome to another episode of Movie Pitch Monday. This is a show where I pitch hypothetical movies, and if you don't know who I am, I'm Edward Mullen. I'm an author, most notably The Art of the Hustle and the PRODIGY series, but I've written a bunch of other ones, and I also host this show. Okay, so in today's pitch, I'm going to be pitching an episode of The X-Files. I love The X-Files, and I watched it as a kid, but a lot of the stuff kind of went over my head, and I wasn't really kind of paying attention, and I didn't really understand the show as much as I thought I did. Now, going back, I've been rewatching some of the episodes and really exposing like the beauty of the show, the brilliant writing. If you're interested, I could link you to some like really fantastic episodes. I believe season 2, episode 25, and then season 3, episode 1 and 2. That like 3-episode kind of mini story arc is fantastic. Really, really classic X-Files episodes, which are filmed in my hometown, which, I mean, it's my hometown now, which is Vancouver, but I didn't grow up in Vancouver, so I didn't make the connection. But now watching it, I see Vancouver in every shot, and it's really, really cool. Okay, so a few days ago, I came across this news story about this little village called Lake Anjikuni, which completely vanished mysteriously. So this fur trapper shows up one day, I think his name's Joe LaBelle, and, you know, the place is completely deserted, but there's all the weapons and the food and like the fur, like the jackets are still there. This is like maybe 100 years ago. And there's a flame and like a pot cooking on the stove. Like the people like just left. And there's some tasks that were like, you know, like somebody was sewing a jacket, like mending it, and they just left like midway through, and they just kind of abandoned the task. This is very, very unusual. Like all the dogs were still there. So where did everybody go? It's kind of captured my imagination. And so I thought it'd be really cool to do an X-Files episode kind of based on this. And as I was doing a little bit of research, this has actually come up a few other times where villages or towns mysteriously vanished. You can just Google it, or maybe I'll put a link in the description below of some videos I watched. So I think it'd be cool if Mulder and Scully show up to this like Inuit village in Alaska, you know, in the winter, and it's just them, and they receive a news report or like a report from like a sheriff of a neighboring town. This town has mysteriously vanished. And I'd put in a lot of the same things. Like there's fire, like food cooking on the stoves and like fire crackling, like, and they just disappeared, not a trace. There's guns, there's weapons, the dogs are still there. And it's a real head scratcher as to where they went. So as they're going around doing their investigation, Mulder is suspecting that it could be aliens, and Scully's not buying it. They go around to talk to like some of the neighboring townspeople and just kind of get a vibe of a feel of like what the situation is. And a lot of people are reporting, you know, strange lights in the sky and old, you know, legends and folklore and of like sky people coming and visiting. And Mulder's like, you know, see, this is pretty interesting. And Scully's like, you know, this is just folklore. Like oftentimes when you have primitive, you know, civilizations, you know, hundreds of years ago, they didn't necessarily have the means to explain a lot of like natural phenomenon like lightning and thunder and aurora borealis and that kind of thing. So, you know, in the absence of scientific explanation, they just make up legend or mythology to kind of explain this stuff. And this culture has been relatively preserved for hundreds or thousands of years. It's, you know, a village in Alaska. It's not near any sort of civilization. It stands to reason that they also, you know, passed along those kind of legends and folklore, and it just spread. But that's all it is. It's just an inability to explain natural phenomenon. And that's what kind of Scully is chalking this up as. Mulder is like, you know what, I think this is a little bit more, you know, there might be a little bit more truth to kind of some of these stories. So as they're kind of doing their investigation, the sheriff calls them up and says, hey, I have something here for you. You better get down here. So Scully and Mulder get down to the sheriff's office, and he's like, yo, you should see this. That kid over there, there's like some teenager sitting there. He's from the tribe that disappeared. He just turned up. And they're like, well, that's incredible. Let's talk to him. They're like, yeah, let's like, he's not talking to anyone. He's like keeping pretty quiet, but like we know him. We don't know him, but like we know of him because we're kind of neighboring towns, and you know, maybe there's trades that happen and we recognize his face, but so we know he's from the village, but you know, he's not talking to anyone. And so, you know, Mulder and Scully, they're from the FBI. This guy is like this First Nations person. He's maybe distrusting of outsiders, so he's not really talking to anyone. So he somehow like disappears. They're like, hey, well, keep an eye on him. Let's go in the back and chat. They come back out. The kid's gone. And they're like, what the hell? So what they end up doing, Mulder and Scully end up doing, is they get like an expert tracker, like somebody who's good at like looking at footprints, and they have like dogs that like smell scents. And they go back to the village and they track this kid, and they're going through like the woods, and it's getting dark and it's pretty sketchy. It's cold. They even have to spend the night outside. They're like, you know, huddling up and building a fire. Okay, so in the morning, they're still following the tracks, and it leads them to this like monolithic, like ancient kind of ruins, like almost like Stonehenge, or I don't know if I want to do like a pyramid or something like that, but something cool that's like, whoa, how the hell did that get there? And as they're kind of snooping around, it's like a cave dwelling with these big like monolithic stone pillars that like it would be very impossible for like 1,000-year-old First Nations tribe to, you know, they weren't suspected to have the technology to move these big stones or to carve them. They're like intricately carved. So they're like, what the hell? So then they go into this cave, and they have their flashlights, and all on the cave wall are these like primitive cave paintings. And they're kind of telling a story which appears to be like visitors from the sky came down and gave them technology to like move these stones and cut the stones, and maybe gave them advanced technology. And, you know, there's another image that's not really sitting right with Mulder. So as Mulder is kind of analyzing this pictograph or whatever it's called, this painting on this cave wall, Scully and the other guy are like, hey, like the kid is outside, like let's get him. So Mulder quickly abandons that, goes chasing after this kid. He's got a little, you know, dog, or not a little dog, but like a husky or something, whatever kind of dogs they have in Alaska. And they eventually kind of capture him, and they chase him like, look, man, we're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. Like, what happened? Like, they have so many questions. Like, how did these stone pillars get made? What's with these paintings that show like aliens? What happened to this village? And the guy's like, eventually talks. He's like, look, man, I'm a hunter, right? So I go out and I try to, you know, procure meat or other, you know, sources of food for my village. And as I came back, I saw like men take my village of people. And so they're like, what do you mean men? They're like, you know, like men in kind of black suits or whatever, like cars. So he's like, okay, it's not aliens. He's like, no, it's not aliens, but like I have seen some stuff. I've seen lights. He's like, well, what's with those paintings? Like those show aliens. He's like, yeah, I don't know. Like they were here when we got here. So they're from our ancient ancestors. It's like, well, what about these rocks? How did you guys move those? They're like, yeah, we have no clue, right? So they make their way back to the village where these people eventually disappeared, and they're starting to analyze, like, you know, the boot prints. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? There are boot prints here, and there are like tire treads, like just over here. I think this kid's story is checking out. Like, it looks like there's some, you know, government agents or whatever came to this village and took everyone. Now, why would they want to take everyone? That doesn't really make any sense. So they're back at the hotel, some kind of crappy, dingy motel in the middle of nowhere, and they're a little bit puzzled by all this, and they haven't really figured out, you know, why these people have been abducted, why seemingly the government, or who are these people that like have taken this village. And so Mulder is thinking back, kind of hypothesizing. He's like, you know, there was a really strange image in there, and I didn't really think anything of it at the time, or I didn't really, you know, get a good look at it. But now thinking back, it kind of looked like aliens. I don't know if interbreed is the right word, but maybe like genetically modified humans. Now, this is actually a theory that Zechariah Sitchin had. If you're familiar with the book, I think it's called the 10th or 11th Planet, or 12th, I think it's called the 12th Planet, something like that. It's like the Earth Chronicle series. You can look into it. Zechariah Sitchin, I won't go into the whole thing, but he talked about this theory of like the Anunnaki, these ancient aliens coming to Earth and like genetically modifying human beings. It's a whole story. There's a whole series of it about ancient aliens, and there's, you know, fingerprints of the gods. There's lots of literature and like documentaries and TV shows and all that kind of stuff on this subject if you're interested. So Mulder is kind of bringing up some of that stuff. He's like, look, man, it's like all around the world. He's kind of dropping the facts, which I don't necessarily want to get into because it's going to take me, 20 minutes. But he's saying like, all the kind of evidence to support his claim that alien visitors came to Earth at some point in the past and either, interbred with humans or genetically modified humans, gave us knowledge or advanced technology, or had some role in like kind of evolution of human beings. And he was saying, what if this is actually true and this is kind of depicted on this wall, these kind of sky people, as they call, come to Earth and, genetically mix somehow with these kind of First Nations people. Now, Scully is, a medical doctor. She's a rational mind, a scientist. She's like, well, I need some evidence. He's like, well, we have one of the kids, right? Why don't we just take his blood? We'll send it back to the lab. We'll analyze it. And it's surely going to be, it's going to have some anomaly. And Scully goes, well, even if that's true, this is a tribe of people that have, been very isolated for thousands of years. Their lineage stretched back, thousands of years, presumably. And it's very possible, in isolation, they evolved completely different, and maybe their genetic makeup or genetic code is different in a significant way to humans. And that doesn't necessarily mean alien intervention. It could just mean that they kind of took a different path, or selective breeding, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so they find the kid, they get a sample of his blood, they send it off. They're waiting for the phone call to get the results back, and the government again shows up, or these kind of strange, rogue militants. I don't know what they look like, but they show up because maybe there's word that there's another kid, or maybe they want to clean the entire site and wipe it from existence, or do something. So they're back and they're swarming, and they take the kid. And Mulder and Scully are kind of watching this from a distance. They're like, oh my God, they got the kid, right? And they put him in the back of the truck, and the truck takes off, and maybe it lifts off the ground and comes slamming down. The wheels fold out to the sides, the doors come off, and the kid bolts into the forest, and the dog runs after him, and they take off. And Mulder and Scully are just kind of left dumbfounded, like, what the hell was that, right? So at the end of the episode, they're flying back to Washington, D.C., and they get the blood results back, and it does show some weird anomaly that modern medicine or biology can't really explain. And Mulder's like, look, we saw some crazy stuff out there. How do you explain that thing that levitated? And then he starts bringing up the pyramids and all the different kind of monolithic stone structures that are seemingly impossible to lift from, primitive technology in the Bronze Age. They didn't have the technology to make all the smooth, perfect geometrical shapes and angles and lift these giant stones, and Stonehenge and the Mayan ruins. It's it looks as if there is some sort of technology that was lost, or some technique to anti-gravity levitation, which I've looked into a little bit, and there's some crazy stuff on the internet on YouTube, which shows I mean, I'm not smart enough to analyze this and whether it's legit or not, but it's very interesting stuff if you want to look into it. Maybe I'll provide some links in the description below. But it appears as though anti-gravity levitation is possible, and maybe this this technology was given to early humans by a higher being, and this is what Mulder and Scully saw. Maybe this kid is has some technology that can lift this vehicle off the ground or something. I don't know. It doesn't really go into it. It doesn't explain it. Kind of leaves it as a mystery. And so Mulder is kind of holding on to this theory, yeah, that kid is an alien human hybrid, and he's out there somewhere. He's one of one. I mean, there's a whole village of people, but they're maybe slaughtered or in some government facility. They'll never see the light of day. But there's one kid out there that kind of has the answers. His lineage, his DNA is tied back to this ancient, because this has happened before. The village has been visited by people, as according to this cave painting. And so the end of the episode wraps up. They never hear from the kid. They don't really have anything resolved on where these people vanished. But so yeah, anyway. All right, so there it is, my pitch for the X-Files. If you liked the pitch, please hit the like button. If you want to see more pitches like this, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment for me. Give me any suggestions for future movie pitches. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.